Get ready to level up your English vocabulary with today's real-life English vocabulary lesson. You are about to master 10 important English vocabulary phrases, plus one bonus phrase that I just couldn't leave out of today's lesson. Hi, I'm Emma from Artificial Fluency. And like always, I have created a free PDF worksheet for you with all of today's important English phrases, definitions, sample sentences, but at the bottom of this worksheet is something special. There is a quiz. You can test yourself to see if you really learned and can remember today's key phrases. You can click on the link in the description to download that free PDF worksheet and take the quiz. A few weeks ago, my husband Dan and I made this conversation lesson for you about travel. The expressions that you're going to learn today are from that conversation. That means they are absolutely used in real life. These are not textbook English phrases, only in the classroom English phrases. These are real life English phrases, which is what we try to do here on the Speak English with Vanessa YouTube channel. I'm going to be helping you learn the expression, and then we will watch it in the original conversation clip, so you will be able to see how it was originally used. Let's start with our first phrase. Our first real-life English phrase is, "There's no place like it." Have you ever visited somewhere that felt so unique and so special? Nothing else compared to that place. Well, you might use this phrase. There's no place like it. If you have ever had a picnic beneath the Eiffel Tower on a beautiful sunny day, you might say, there's no place like it. It's a very magical experience. Or when you go on a trip and you come home and you see your home and you feel warm and cozy and comfortable, you can also use this phrase, home. There's no place like it. Sometimes we even say there's no place like home. If you have ever seen the famous movie The Wizard of Oz, this is a phrase that the character Dorothy says, there's no place like home. And when she says it multiple times and taps her feet, she can go home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. All right, let's watch how this was used in the original clip. Dan is talking about New York City, and he is explaining that really, there is no place like it. New York City is a very unique, multicultural city, and it's certainly unique in the US. There's no place like it. Let's watch that original clip so that you can see how it was used in our conversation. When you're in America, if you've never been to New York before, it feels like a different country because there's really no place like it. And there's just like so much diversity and action going on there. So, but that's a bit of a cheat. The real first place I traveled abroad was Costa Rica. The second real life English phrase is to cater to someone. What if I told you this? This YouTube channel caters to English learners. Well, I am making something special that someone needs. You, hopefully. This is something that someone needs. I make these lessons to cater to English learners. If you're a native English speaker, you're probably not going to watch this, and that's okay. So in the conversation with Dan, he was talking about visiting Costa Rica. And the first time that he visited Costa Rica on a school trip, they visited some resorts. And he was saying, you know what, these are not real cultural Costa Rican places. These places, these resorts, cater to a Western audience, or they at least cater to tourists. They are made specifically for tourists. They are not made for local people to go to, and thus it's not a really authentic experience, but it's still an experience, right? All right, let's see how to cater to someone was used in the original conversation. It wasn't a very cultural experience, I don't think. This is a very nature-based experience. Yeah, even though there was a sprinkling of that every now and then, but I remember we went to resorts and stuff, so those places are really catering to let's say the Western audience. Yeah, so it didn't really feel as legit as some of the other travels I've done abroad later in life. The third real-life English expression is a position of privilege. You might have heard this word privilege used before, but I'd like to introduce you to this full phrase because it's useful to use full phrases and it's an easier way to remember the grammar of how things are put together, a position of privilege. What if I said this to you? Going to college or university is a position of privilege. Well, it means that not everyone can do it. It's expensive. You need to have the right living conditions. You need to live in the right place where you can go to college or university. You need to have support probably from your family. This is a position of privilege. So this expression is talking about where someone has an advantage that someone else does not have, an advantage or an opportunity. And that's how we used it in the conversation with Dan. We said traveling abroad is a position of privilege. You have to have money. You have to have a job that's willing to give you time off. You have to have a lot of things to be able to travel abroad, especially in the US, because traveling abroad usually means you have to go far away and it's expensive, takes a long time. So I was acknowledging a lot of Americans don't travel abroad for some very valid reasons. It's a position of privilege. You should be grateful that you get to travel abroad. If you get to travel abroad, because a lot of people never get that experience. You should be grateful for it and thankful for it. All right, let's watch how this was used in the original conversation. I want to know, do you think it's true that most Americans don't travel abroad? Because it is definitely a position of privilege. You have to have money, you have to have connections, all of this to be able to travel abroad, no matter what country you live in. But it's kind of a stereotype, right? Americans don't travel to other countries. Yeah, it's a stereotype, and I think it's generally true. The fourth important real-life English expression is I cannot imagine. Notice the emphasis here. Let me give you a sample sentence. I cannot imagine sending my 7-year-old son to go work in a mine. Well, this was something that was pretty common a little over 100 years ago, maybe less than 100 years ago, that children, when they turned 7 years old, would go work in a mine. My son is 7. I cannot imagine sending him to go work in a mine. This is beyond my imagination, and I'm really grateful that that's not part of my daily reality. And here I could have said, I can't imagine sending my son to go work in a mine. But instead, I used the full phrase, I cannot imagine, because I'm really emphasizing. I want you to hear the word not so clearly that you are guaranteed to understand what I'm saying. So in this phrase, we often do say that full word, cannot. I cannot imagine. And in the conversation with Dan, we were talking about cultural differences between the US and France. We were talking about how in France, it's common to give a kiss on both cheeks when you greet someone. And in the US, this would never happen. Our faces are so private. We just don't get close to each other's faces like that. So I said, I cannot imagine that happening in the US. I think there's a lot of fun cultural differences like this that if you imagine that happening in your home country, it would just be shocking, right? All right, let's watch how this was used in the original conversation. I was introduced to every person, like 30 people in the room, a bisu to every single person. Mwah, 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 to each person. I just remember thinking, I cannot imagine this happening. He's very American too. French, they're mad. That's a stereotype. And for me, I got used to it because it was so common. The fifth important daily life expression that we used in our conversation was faux pas. Note the pronunciation here, faux pas. We don't say folks pass. Instead, this is a French word, and we're going to say it in the French style, slightly English style as well. We're going to say faux pas, faux pas. Take a look at this sentence. Wearing white to a wedding in the US is a faux pas unless you're the bride. If I got invited invited to someone's wedding and I wore a white dress to that wedding, that is unacceptable. It is taboo. It is a faux pas. And these are things that are important to learn when you're traveling to another country. What are the biggest faux pas? You don't want to be rude in another country when you're visiting, so it's good to learn a little bit about the culture so that you can avoid faux pas. In the conversation with Dan, we were talking about mistakes and embarrassing things that we have done abroad. And one of the things that we mentioned was at a restaurant one time when we first moved to South Korea, Dan asked for a fork and knife. This was before we got comfortable, I guess, using chopsticks. And he made a faux pas. He asked for a fork when really everyone else was using chopsticks. And within a couple weeks, he was a master at using chopsticks, but he made a faux pas. We sometimes use it with the verb to make. I made a faux pas and I asked for a fork. Silly, silly me. All right, let's see how this was used in the original conversation. That reminds me of when we went to a restaurant in Korea. I don't know if this counts, but you don't really eat stuff with forks and knives, but we definitely asked for forks and knives for something. I don't remember what it was, but that's definitely a classic American faux pas to be like, hey, can I have a fork and a knife over here? The sixth important daily life English expression is, I must say, notice that tone of voice. We're going to be shifting perspectives here. So what if I said this to you? I don't usually like war movies, but I must say I liked that one. Well, I'm comparing my usual perspective. I usually don't like war movies, but I must say, here's the surprising fact, I liked that one. Well, in the conversation with Dan, we were talking about using forks and chopsticks, and I was interjecting. Dan asked for a fork. It was a faux pas. We weren't very good at using chopsticks at the beginning, but I must say we got really good at using chopsticks. So I was trying to encourage us that we didn't just always make social faux pas. We did actually learn how to use chopsticks. There's another phrase, maybe this is like a bonus, that we sometimes use that means the exact same thing, and it is, I gotta admit. I gotta admit, we got pretty good at using chopsticks. I don't usually like war movies, but I gotta admit, I liked that one. This reduced word gotta, pronounce God with a D, even though there's a T, is really I have got to admit. I have got to admit becomes I gotta admit. This is a common reduction in English, and it means the same thing as I must say when you're providing a different perspective that might be the opposite as before. All right, let's see how this was used in the original context from our conversation. That's definitely a classic American faux pas to be like, hey, can I have a fork and a knife over here? Especially if it's like an Asian country that uses chopsticks. I must say though, on our behalf, we got really good at using chopsticks. Sure, I can use them, no problem. They would make fun of the way I held it, apparently. Right. The seventh important daily life expression is to get used to something. A quick note, listen to the pronunciation of this. To get used to something. Well, I said use, but there's actually a D at the end of that word. Get used to. But we don't say the D, but make sure you don't forget it if you're writing this phrase. Get used to. All right, let's take a look at a sample sentence. I used to live in the country, but after 2 years of living in the city, I got used to the noise. This just means I adapted and it became familiar and comfortable. I got used to the noise. Sometimes we use this as encouragement to someone else. So if you move to the city and you tell your coworker, it is just so noisy here. Your coworker might say to you, oh, don't worry, you'll get used to it. It'll be fine. This means you'll adapt. You'll figure out how to be comfortable with this. And in the conversation with Dan, we were talking about safety and how public safety is different in different countries. So if you're living somewhere that is slightly more dangerous, well, you just get used to it over time. You become more aware of what you should do and what you shouldn't do. So it's not always a constant threat in most places, and you just get used to it. All right, let's see how this was used in the original conversation, and I want you to listen specifically for that pronunciation. Get used to. Let's watch. I don't know what it's like now in Buenos Aires, maybe not everywhere there, but she was so used to never wearing earrings or necklaces or her phone in public. Somebody did like rip jewelry off her there. Yeah, she got sorry, Buenos Aires. This is what we've heard. But that was her experience. So when she moved to Korea, it was shocking. The safety issue was shocking for her too. And you just get used to it after a period of time. The 8th important daily life expression is to be able to tell something. Usually we use the word tell when we're talking about talking. I told my friend. Will you tell my friend this important news? That is not what we're using here. Instead, we're using it in a slightly more abstract way. Take a look at this sentence. I could tell it rained overnight because the ground was still wet. Here, I'm using my senses to observe. I observed that the ground was wet. So we can say, oh, I could tell it rained because the ground was wet. I am observing something and coming to a conclusion. So maybe when you first started to study English with me, you watched your first lesson, you could use this expression, I can tell that these lessons are going to be useful for me. I'm going to subscribe to Vanessa's YouTube channel. Great idea. So here you're observing after your first lesson, I know, I can tell that these lessons will be useful to me. I hope so. Well, in the conversation with Dan, I was describing a very uncomfortable experience that I had abroad. When I told other people that I was from the US, I could tell that they were surprised because they would stop and stare and ask me questions. But they didn't stop and stare and ask questions to my other friends who were from other countries. This made me feel really uncomfortable because the US is cool, but it's not cooler than those other countries, right? At least that's how I felt. So I could tell, I observed that they were surprised. The look on their face, oh, I have all these questions I want to ask you. I could tell they were surprised. And sometimes it was a little bit too much for me. All right, let's see how this expression was used in the original conversation. The group of us girls would go everywhere together. We did so many things. It was a wonderful time. And when we met people, they would ask, where are you from? And everyone would say where they were from. And when I said I was from the US, you could tell they just stopped and would say, oh, an American. Oh, and they would ask me questions like, is it true this? Is it true this? And I guess it's a little more unusual. The next important daily life expression is to be biased. Note the pronunciation here. Biased. Biased. To be biased about something. What if I said to you this? My children are the most beautiful children in the entire world. Well, do you think that this is actually true? Well, they might be beautiful children, but you know what? I am biased about my own children. This means that my opinion is changed or is influenced by my own personal experience. Well, of course, I'm going to think my children are the most beautiful, are the best in the whole world, right? Because I'm their mother. I am biased. You can be biased about a lot of things. And in the conversation with Dan, he said, oh, I think you're pretty cool. Talking to me, his wife. And I used this expression, which maybe was a little bit dismissive. I said, well, you're biased. So it was hard for me to accept his compliment. He was trying to compliment me that, oh, Vanessa, you're really cool. And I could have said, maybe I should have said, oh, thank you. But instead, I kind of pushed it away and said, well, you're biased. He's my husband, so he should think I'm cool, right? He is invested in our relationship. He needs to think I'm cool in order to have a good relationship. So I kind of used this in a little bit of a dismissive way, maybe a little bit lighthearted. Oh, you're biased. It's hard to accept compliments sometimes, right? But this word bias can be used especially in the news. If you hear a news reporter always saying something negative about a politician? Well, that politician might be terrible, but they're probably doing something good, right? And if they never report those good things and always report those bad things, they are biased against that politician. They are showing a perspective that is only one-sided, not the other side. And that's hard about the news, right? It's hard to find a news source that is not biased. If you find one, let me know. I would love to know. So in this way, we have to look at multiple different news sources in order to get the full picture. All right, let's see how this expression, to be biased, was used in the original conversation when I dismissed Dan's compliment. Let's watch. There are Americans that travel, but I don't know. I felt so embarrassed by that because maybe your age. I wasn't cooler than my friends. I'm just a normal person. But you're a little biased, dear. But it felt so weird to stop the conversation for something like that, especially when my friends are super cool. Why not ask them about their countries? Our 10th expression, which is technically our final expression, but we have a bonus expression after this. Our 10th expression is no one in their right mind. I love this phrase. So it is saying you would be absolutely crazy if you did this. No one in their right mind would allow a child to drive a car. What does this mean, right mind? We're saying if your brain, your mind, is working correctly, you wouldn't do that. You would not allow a child to drive a car. You are not in your right mind. This is the phrase we use. No one in their right mind would allow a child to drive a car. And Dan used this in kind of a lighthearted way. He said that in the US, it's really difficult to walk places. There's a store here and a store here, and maybe you want to go to both stores, and the distance is not very far. You could walk there pretty easily, but no one in their right mind would walk from this store to this store because there's a huge road between there with no crosswalks, no easy way to get across, and it's extremely dangerous. No one in their right mind would walk from this store to this store. Instead, you have to drive your car. If you visit the US, you will absolutely see this. It's not walkable and walker-friendly, pedestrian-friendly. Instead, you often have to drive from one location to another, even though they're close, because no one in their right mind would try to cross that highway. It's just not safe. All right, let's see how this extreme, but also kind of funny phrase was used in the original conversation, and then it is going to be bonus phrase time. Let's go. In America, there's lots of places that they design only for cars, and you can't, like, maybe you could walk there, but nobody in their right mind wants to. And so that's just like all over the place here, but especially a place like South Korea, it's just so easy to get everywhere. All right, are you ready for our bonus phrase today? Our bonus real-life English expression is to be game for something. Is this talking about playing a game? Nope. Check out how I used it a couple weeks ago. So Dan and I have a date night every so often. And a couple weeks ago, Dan said to me, oh, there is a new Thai restaurant. This is food from Thailand. A new Thai restaurant that opened up. Do you want to go there for our date at the end of the week? And I said, oh, yes, I'm game for it. This means I'm excited about trying something new. I'm game for it. And in the conversation, Dan used this expression in exactly the same way. I was thanking him for joining our conversation. Thanks so much for filming with me. Thanks so much for teaching the students. And he said, no problem. I'm always game for having an easygoing conversation. That phrase easygoing means just relaxed, not extremely planned. I planned a couple questions, but he was just chit-chatting, just answering the questions, having a good time, and he was enthusiastic about this new adventure. Trying something new, I'm always game for having an easygoing conversation. If you want to do it again, I'll come, and I hope we can do it again. All right, let's watch the clip where he used to be game for in our original conversation. Let's watch. Thank you, Dan, for participating in this conversation. You're welcome. It's always great to have another half of the conversation, not just me talking, because a lot of my students can understand me by myself, but to add another person, it's a good level of challenge. Yeah. You know me, I'm always game for easygoing conversation. Well, I'm glad you are. Thank you. Well, congratulations on learning these 10 plus 1 bonus real life English vocabulary phrases. We absolutely use these in daily life, and I hope that you can too now. Don't forget to download the free PDF worksheet. You can click on the link in the description. That PDF has all of today's important phrases, definitions, sample sentences, bonus phrase, and it has a quiz at the bottom so you can test yourself to see if you really remember all of these phrases. You can take that quiz and test yourself. You can click on the link in the description to download this free PDF worksheet today. It is my gift to you. Well, thank you so much for learning English with me, and I'll see you again next Friday for a new lesson here on my YouTube channel. Bye.